evening, I have the honor and the privilege of introducing to you Maggie Jackson, who is an award-winning journalist and author known for her penetrating writings on technology's impact on humanity. Her acclaimed book, Distracted, concentrates the mind on a real problem of modern life, according to the Wall Street Journal. She is a sought-after speaker and former Boston Globe columnist. Her articles and essays have appeared in publications worldwide, from the New York Times to Utne, a bi-monthly magazine that collects and reprints articles on politics, culture, and the environment. She is currently a vice president and senior fellow at the Columbia University affiliated think tank, the Center for Talent Innovation, and is working on a new book on crafting reflective thought in an age of speed. Put your technology away and please welcome Maggie Jackson.
Thank you very much, and thank you to Debbie and to everyone who put this phenomenal conference together. I know you've all had a good time, and can you give a round of applause to the organizers? A real Texas spirit here we have in the room and in the weekend, so thank you very much. I'd like to start by asking, has anyone ever heard of something called digital detox? Taking a digital detox? Has, Facebook fast, media Sabbath, things like that? Has anybody taken one? Oh, wow, okay. For shout out, 24 hours, a week, a year? Sorry? 30 days. Did someone say 90 minutes? 90 minutes. Well, that's great, because this is, it's all a trend right now. People, you can go into a hotel, they take your smartphone and they check you into the Tranquility Suite, and then they lock up your phone into some kind of safe behind the manager's office. Rock stars are doing it. It's really, and there's an annual event put on by some organization called the Digital Detox. Well, I think this is really interesting. Why would people want to detox from the gadgetry, the devices that connect us with the rest of the world, right? There are eyes and ears now. They are our kind of cognitive prosthetic, our outsourced memory. And there are teddy bear, when in doubt, awkward moment. It's always there, right? Well, why do you think? Any reasons why you think? Raise your hand. An idea? Why? Or why did you do it? Or why do you think people are doing it? Yes?
They consume our lives and we stop having real relationships with people.
They consume our lives and we've stopped having real relationships with people. Yes? Constant source of interruption. I might be talking about that a little bit today. In the middle?
Your eyes get tired after staying asleep for a long time.
That's great. Your eyes get tired after, and well, one more. Yes, gentleman here. To think. Oh, very interesting. Well, I thought a lot about this because it's very intriguing. Why do people do this? And is it an effective way to gain perspective? I'll tell you two little stories. The former U.S. ambassador to Afghanistan, Ryan Crocker, said that when he was in that nation and political tensions were rising, he would go and sit under a tree and think. Interesting. Sit under a tree and think. And then, second story, I was in Canada speaking at a women's leadership conference, and I had spoken, and a woman from the audience came rushing up to me in the hotel lobby as I was going to the airport, and she said, quote, just 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes. That's all I want from my boss, that he keeps his eyes on the screen. So, connecting to others, thinking time, I think this is why people are trying to put these down even temporarily. And so tonight, digital detox is a strong word, and you're here to have fun as well as learn. But let's try to have an e-lull, if you will. Try to shut them off, and together think about the meaning and what the devices are doing to us and put them in context a little bit. That's what I would like to do tonight. Are we lost in the instant, or are we simply rewriting the rules of success for a new age, or a little bit of both? You know, in a culture fueled by technology and marked by competition, what does good thinking look like? And what does thinking like a leader look like today? So tonight I'll talk a little bit about the historic roots of how we got here. You know, some things were occurring before the laptop, the iPhone, the iPad, etc. came into our lives. Second, I will talk about the impact that technology is having at us, and some research that shows the longer-term impact. For the first time, we're able to discern over the long term what's happening to us. And finally, the way forward. I'd like to all maybe ask some questions together about how we can create a society that's connected, thoughtful, and leaderful, and successful, and yet also make use of the power of the machinery before us. Wendell Berry, the great essayist, said, "Our cultural traditions are in large part a continuing effort to understand ourselves as humans." That couldn't be more accurate. And today, in the age of the smart machine, I think that challenge is all the more important. So first, let's start with, how did we get here? The landscape behind what we're doing today. I'd like to look at two experiences that humans have always had and how they've changed today, time and space. First, time. You know, for millennia, since human history, people marked time, whether it was through the sun and the seasons, and then the advent of the clock. People marked time, you know, to know when to eat and sleep and celebrate, etc. In the industrial age, an explosion of new technology suddenly gave people the idea that they could control time. You know, in the early 1900s, people actually used to go to the movie theaters to see movies run backwards, just because it could be done. You know, we had the cinema, the phonograph, you know, the railroad. All of these new technologies gave people an idea that they could stop, start, and control a moment, and run it backwards. And now, what are we doing? We're time splicing. You know, we're trying to do 2 and 3 and 4 things at once as the ticket to efficiency, to success, to cognitive power, etc. You know, it's not unusual now for business leaders to have 2 smartphones. You know, 12% of Americans in a recent study said that they actually check their smartphones while they're making love. And my personal favorite, you can talk about that one later. I should save it to the end of the speech because it engenders a lot of comments. And my personal favorite, I was driving, but I was a passenger in a car on a major highway near New York where I live, I-95 in Connecticut. And I looked over, my husband was driving, and I saw a man speeding down the highway watching a movie on his laptop while driving his car. My personal favorite, time splicing. You know, he was being efficient, right? So the message here, the message that time splicing gives to us, that speed and brevity are best. You know, we live in a world of micro moments. Now, space, where are we in this networked planet? You know, we are in a certain place, but we're inhabiting something called space. Now, according to one cultural geographer at the University of Wisconsin, place is a realm of pause, while space is a canvas for movement. Now, which describes us best? We're on the go, you know, snarfing down power bars, we're driving everywhere. Now, but interestingly, the number of miles that the average American drives a year has been sliding slowly downhill for the past 6 years. And even if you take into consideration the rise in gas prices, it's been puzzling the experts. Finally, they came to the bottom of this. Really, the largest decline in the driving miles is among young people, and because kids don't need to go anywhere. They don't need to show up. You know, they have a kind of hypermobility of the mind through the virtual. Now, so we are on the go, but we're doing it cognitively now. We're restless spirits, as Alexander de Tocqueville said, but it's a mobility of the mind. So the message here is there are no limits to who you are, to where you want to be, to what happens to you. The seasons in this mobile, restless, time-displacing world is kind of like a screensaver. You know, does winter or summer, wherever you are, is it really an impediment to anything you want to do? It's a screensaver. Distance, of course, is nullified. You know, we can be in a plane and hop, over to Singapore in a few hours. Of course, distance is shattered. But so is duration. Waiting, something kind of like a frustrating surprise. Waiting. We're lost in the instant. We don't need to wait. The average number of seconds, the average email is answered in 6 seconds. And when online shoppers are online and they are on a website, they abandon the website in guess how many seconds if it doesn't load quickly enough. Guess how many seconds the average shopper? 2. And in 2006, it was 4 seconds. Our patience. As Margaret Thatcher said, I'm extraordinarily patient, provided I get my way in the end. So we see these changes all around us. You see it happening, of course. But what are some of the long-term consequences? That's what I'd like to discuss next. What are some of our vulnerabilities amidst all these wondrous gains? We're living in the instant, but what's lost in the instant? Let's consider, again, time. This time-displacing experience we're dealing with. Well, a couple of series of studies is beginning to show what this diet of media multitasking might be doing to us. Work out of Stanford, for instance, contrasted high multitaskers, people who were often dealing with about 4 streams of media, very common today, with low multitaskers who prefer to do one thing at a time often. To the research, to the scientists' shock, the high multitaskers did it poorly. They made more mistakes, they were slower, and here's the killer. The high multitaskers actually were less able to tell what was important and what was trivial in their environment. They kind of sped past in these cognitive tests what they were supposed to be looking for. And of course that makes sense. If you're barreling down the street, glued to this and that, in a hurry, do you have time for the nuances, the gray areas, the fine-grained details? No. The scientist at Stanford, Clifford Nass, who dealt with these studies, called the high multitaskers suckers for irrelevancy. A second series of studies showed a little bit about what high multitasking is doing to people's memories. Now, when you're learning something new and you're juggling other things, you're actually using parts of your brain related to automatic behavior. If you're really focused on what you're doing, kind of unitasking, you're learning with the hippocampus and with parts of your brain related to deeper memory. So what does that mean? It means you can learn, you can take in a new situation, you can do homework, you can get an A on the test, but cumulatively, you're not learning deeply. And you are taking in that information and you're not going to be able to transfer it to new situations. So it's sort of, at the top of your mind. It's kind of like skim milk learning. And that deeper transfer of knowledge, of course, is the root of wisdom and creativity. So these are some of the hints about what this media diet and time splicing are doing to us. What else is missing when we're lost in the moment? Or what is a vulnerability in this new way of life? Something I call verticality. We often think of greatness as epiphany, something that struck us. The great minds of the world were either by the muse, or they had a lightning bolt of insight. We love that kind of depiction of what genius is. And yet, time after time after time, you see behind the stories of greatness, such as the discovery of DNA by Crick and Watson, years of daydreaming, of discussion, of errors, of mistakes. Crick and Watson took 2 years, and they were newcomers, a biologist and a physicist trying to deal with the greatest problem at the time, discovering the code of life. Building up an idea, kind of moving toward a solution slowly is really where all invention lies. And today, in America, creativity scores are actually on the decline, surprisingly. Across the board, from kindergarten to adulthood, measures of originality, of fluency, etc. But the score, the measurement that is most declining is something called elaboration. The ability to take an idea, to put flesh on it, to push it into something great. Elaboration. When's the last time we, you, I, anyone, chased a daydream and pinned it down? So of course, we all want information at our fingertips. We all want instant connectivity. Of course, I love it as a researcher, as a scholar, as a journalist. I love the databases, ability to have anything I want at my fingertips. We love to be immersed in the instant. I'm not a patient person, actually. And information and instantaneity are really the makings of powerful knowledge, the makings, the first raw beginnings of knowledge. But are we today expecting too much of our technology and not enough of ourselves? In the competition for our minds, for our attention, who is in charge? Jaron Lanier, who is a technologist, inventor of virtual reality, and now an author who wrote a book called You Are Not a Gadget, tells a wonderful story in his latest book about technology. He was a judge at a contest at Stanford University for entrepreneurs. I think they're business students. And 3 guys got up to make the presentation to the judges, and they were saying that they were developing an app. And the 3 students said, this is going to be an app that tells people where the pretty girls are in bars. Okay, so Jaron Lanier said, it won't work. It can't be accurate. And the 3 students said to him, they had a very quick retort. We know it's not going to work. We're selling hope. So today, we need to ask ourselves, are we a little too hopeful about our technologies? Our gadgets will improve. They will get ever increasingly better. But we can't count on these gadgets to do the work of meaning making for us. Tools matter, but humans matter more. We're narrowing ourselves if we try to do away with duration, with serendipity, with that daydreaming I talked about. Creativity actually percolates, and neurologically speaking, neuroscientists have found that artists, that creative people, that writers, painters actually think more slowly because white matter, the kind of myelination of the brain, is stronger in their brains, and so therefore the actual thought patterns in their brains are a little bit slowed down, so they're a little bit more associational. People who are creative are thinking more slowly. Achievement is crafted, as I mentioned. And of course, great leaders are not made overnight. George Washington was famously deliberate. He was criticized in his day for sometimes being slow to make a decision. But who had the great vision for what kind of a country we could be? And as a leader, he listened to his advisors. Martin Luther King, in his greatest speech ever, I Have a Dream, talked about the fierce urgency of now. We cannot let civil rights take another generation, he said. And yet, those words were preceded by years of painstaking doubt and civil protests and work behind the scenes. He was persistent. He too saw the larger picture. So what do? I sketched out a tension between time splicing and multitasking and shallow learning and these great powerful tools that we hold in our hands. What can we do? I am actually hopeful. How do we gain perspective? How do we recover the integrity of the moment? Recover the depth of thought? How do we become great thinking leaders? Well, I have two suggestions, not silver bullets, not recipes, not answers, but two, perhaps, starting points that you might disagree with. First, consider boundaries. Just as we see great thought as being often tied to epiphanies, we also often see boundaries as confinements, especially in this day and age. We see them as old-fashioned. We tore down the boundaries between home and work. Hey, that's so yesterday. We're tearing down boundaries between gender roles. So yesterday, boundaries demarcate. But yet, boundaries also, draw lines where we need them to be. A teen curfew, a job description, a weekend. These are systems of prioritization. They are safety zones. They're structures for going deeply. And what kind of boundary making we need most is focus. A safety zone, a spotlight of the mind, a boundary that demarcates what you're doing now. In the industrial age, focus was, we tried to train people to focus through new bureaucracies, through schools, etc. Focus, rigid, unbending focus was the ideal in that industrial age with these new technologies. And now we're trying to rebel against it. To do anything, anywhere. And yet, let's remember that boundaries let us think creatively, that they are building blocks for leadership and for great thinking. They keep us from being scattered. They restore the integrity of the moment. They pave the way for verticality. And I think we sense that we're ready for a change. At one university, 70% of students said they text in class, and 64% said they know it's hurting their education. So how do we restore boundaries? Well, some people keep their smartphone in their trunk when they're driving. A very simple solution. Work at a Harvard Business School shows that just simply pausing before you start a new activity leads to more creativity. You're clearing your mind, you're making a boundary before you plunge in. And of course, role modeling is very important to the boundary making we need when we're relating to people. Attentive listening is really about boundary making. So we talked today about having it all, and yet, can we really have it all this minute? Second, and probably most importantly, we need to question norms. Psychologically, it's been proven again and again that, of course, you see what you expect to see. You can't take the world in as you walk down the street as if it's all new, of course. We need to have routines. We need to have this familiarity until something novel or intentional breaks the spell, and you see it with fresh eyes. Kind of like being a tourist. You see it all with fresh eyes. Consider the technologies and their familiarity that we have. Electric lights. Do we see them anew anymore? No, of course not. They're part of the backdrop of our lives. Cars, of course, faded into the background. Not worth a minute's thought, really, unless they break down. Telephones, we take them for granted. The technologies that we are infusing in our life fade into the background of our lives. And yet, this invisibility of our technologies and our devices makes us forget the value systems behind them. What do they mean? And this is particularly important in a day when the makers of our technology's main goal is to create seamlessness between the device and the human, for the good of using them, and yet the upshot of that is that it actually creates an increasing sort of perceptual fade about what your devices are doing to us. The message from the makers really is, if you look behind the screens, a break from your technology is a defeat. Don't leave home without it. This is it, the latest Apple campaign says. This is what matters. Now, I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist. This is really the sociology of the devices. And as much as we might accept them and use them, we also have to step back and see them anew with fresh eyes. Maybe, maybe not. A second value system related to technology that we often might see is the image of success. What is a successful leader today? The person head down, rushing through the street, half listening to those around them. That's kind of an icon of success in our hyper-restless, novel, seeking America today. So these are some of the boundaries that some of the norms that we need to question. We need to consider that by valuing what machines do best, the quick, the clear cut, the instant, the parallel processing, we are sidelining what humans do well. The gray area, the nuancing, the reflection, the slow thinking. So keep asking these questions. Keep questioning the norms surrounding your life. In the summer of 2012, the commencement speaker at UCLA was a young doctor who was also an investor named Michael Burry. I don't know if you've heard of him. But he gave an address that's viral on the web now. You can see it on YouTube. And he talked about his life, his experiences. He called out the great mortgage debacle of 2008. He saw it coming. He was alone, questioning, skeptical about all the great promises that the economic bubble could last forever. He made a packet, of course, but he also questioned some really important, mistakes that were made, in our country about the financial system. And this is what he told these students that day. He said, you have one epic chance to free yourselves to think for yourself. He said, it's a feat of staggering difficulty. Sometimes you'll look in the mirror and you'll ask yourself why. Why am I questioning what everyone else thinks? But he said, never stop asking questions. And never stop questioning our devices. So in this time-splicing, limitless world, let's consider how to recapture the integrity of the moment and verticality. Let's rediscover boundary making and the questioning of norms. We need to ask again and again, who or what is answering for you? Is instantaneity really synonymous with progress? Is self-control an app? Is wisdom downloadable? By taking a close look at the competition for our minds going around us, we can reshape our ideas of wisdom, creativity, and greatness. And just in closing, I'm sure you've heard of this fable, the tortoise and the hare, right? We all know it. The tortoise plodded along. The rabbit took off like $1 million, got overconfident, sat by the side of the road. The tortoise won. The message is clear, right? But is this really an ad for being a tortoise, this fable? Does this really make us think well of slow? Because that tortoise won from it was a fluke. Opportunism handed him a victory. fast, I think the implication is really got the goods. And yet, in the life of the mind, slow changes the course, changes the race course. The slow thinker is the person who questions, who is skeptical enough to see multiple sides of the argument. The slow thinker is the one who checks his or her work to see that it's done right. The slow thinker prizes the integrity of the moment that gives them the chance to elaborate on that idea. And the slow thinker, enjoys the daydream, that's the digression that might lead to a leap of understanding. So today, the great thinkers need to value how to think slow. If we want to think like leaders, we need at times to think slowly. Leadership that is patient and tolerant will allow us to restore the depth and integrity that we're lacking in this world today. And leadership that is slow will allow us to work alongside our devices, not be yoked to them. As Abraham Lincoln once said, nothing valuable can be lost by